Hello Horror Stories, I am a subscriber to your channel and finally decided to write to you. My name is Serena. This story not only belongs to me, but also to my husband and a couple of friends. My best friend and her husband. We were all traveling together at the time. In the end, you will understand why it is such a delicate story and why I had to request prior authorization to share it on your channel. It is the most disturbing thing I have experienced in my entire life. I do it for the purpose of warning people so that they know and be alert, because evil is everywhere. We are all exposed to it, perhaps at the wrong place and time. But once it is before your eyes, do not challenge it because you will not be able to escape. It was the summer of 2015. As I mentioned earlier, we were returning from a vacation trip together. We were returning from Florida, but the nearest airport was more than 2 hours from where we lived, so we had left the car parked in the airport parking lot. Already after 11 at night, we were halfway there. The road had little traffic, if not empty. We were in the middle of the field when, suddenly, my friend and her husband made us notice something between the trees. We thought it was some animal, so my husband slowed down. As we approached, we could make out that there were 4 people holding hands. At that distance, we couldn't tell if they were men or women, since they were wearing black robes that covered their heads. They were surrounding what appeared to be a tombstone on the side of the road, with a small candle burning in the center. Seeing that gave me chills. I told my husband to speed up, while my friend and her husband, intrigued, wanted to take a closer look. I didn't want to know anything because those people wouldn't be doing anything good in the middle of the field at that time of night surrounding what looked like a tombstone. It was really scary. It seemed like some kind of cult or an evil ritual. When they realized we were looking at them, they turned around and their face was really creepy, which I can't even describe. They stared at us without barely moving or looking away for a second, with threatening eyes and a defiant expression. I asked my husband again to please speed up. I could barely whisper to him. The words wouldn't come out. We had to get out of there quickly. It was clear that these people did not have good intentions, and it was dangerous to stay. We advanced a few kilometers until we lost sight of them and stopped at the first gas station we found to eat something and go to the bathroom. The truth is that we were all a little nervous and needed a break. I was in the bathroom with my friend, and she insisted that we go back to that place. I was convinced that those people had already left, and I wanted to see what they had done there. I asked her if she had gone crazy, that we weren't going back there and that we should go home. However, she continued to insist, saying that they had surely performed some kind of witchcraft on the abandoned tomb. My answer was a resounding no. I was still very afraid and considered it very risky. The macabre faces and dark looks of those people were still fresh in my mind. Despite my answers, my friend insisted so much that I don't know how, I finally accepted. We left the bathroom and told our husbands. I think that in order not to seem vulnerable, they also accepted, although their faces reflected the same terror that I felt. The only thing I told Sandra was that we were going, but on one condition. If those people were still there, we would turn around immediately, long before they realized we were there, and forget about it. Everyone accepted this condition and we got into the car. Returning along the road to that place, the atmosphere became increasingly dense, as if fear and terror were palpable in the air. We were driving with the lights low and in complete silence. As we got closer, I felt more chills, but to my surprise, and I was able to say at that moment, luckily, when we arrived, they were gone. My husband stopped and grabbed a small flashlight he had on his car keychain. Without hesitation, my friend and her husband also got off. The tombstone was just over a meter from the road and was visible almost from the car, so it was not necessary to go far into the field to see it. That was the reason I felt more confident wanting to go down, knowing that if those people came back, we would have enough time to quickly get back to the car and get out of there. Upon arriving, we noticed that on the tombstone there was a cross surrounded by ashes, as if something had been burned there. There was a smell that was unlike anything we had ever smelled before. It was very strong and unpleasant. We didn't see anything with the naked eye until my friend looked behind the tombstone and began removing the ashes and branches scattered on it. It was then that he discovered something underneath, undoing the ritual arrangement. What he found under the ashes left us stunned. There was a small makeshift altar with melted black candles and what appeared to be the remains of burnt leaves and herbs. In the center of the altar was a small object wrapped in a black cloth. My friend, with fear but also determination, unrolled the fabric and revealed a small doll made of dark and twisted materials, with pins stuck in various parts of its body. And the most shocking thing was that inside that fabric there was a photo of a woman, with twisted written drawings on his face. We were shocked. Sandra took the initiative to dismantle and disperse everything, thinking that it would not affect that poor woman in the photo. No one but her dared to touch anything. At that moment I was shaking with fear, hugging my husband and looking around in case someone was coming. The truth is that until that moment, I didn't know Sandra's bravery. On the other hand, I was terrified that those people would come back and surprise us by getting rid of all their things and hurt us. But just at that moment, a gust of cold wind shook the place, causing the candles to flicker and the nearby trees to creak. We looked at each other, feeling how the atmosphere was charged with a dense and disturbing energy. Without saying a word, we decided it was time to go. He quickly picked up everything and we returned to the car, with the feeling that something or someone was watching us from the darkness of those grasslands. We got into the car with a sense of relief on one hand, knowing that we were no longer in danger and that we had undone an evil ritual involving a woman. However, what we didn't know was that the worst was about to begin. I didn't know anything about witchcraft or these types of rituals, so I was totally unaware that you can't touch these types of rituals with your own hands, much less try to undo them. Until just after a few weeks, Sandra began to gradually get sick out of nowhere, to the point where she could no longer get out of bed. He had been diagnosed with an extremely rare blood disease, and sadly there was no hope of recovery. His condition was very advanced and they could only prescribe medication to alleviate his suffering. We couldn't understand what was happening to him. It took us by surprise, since he was in good health and had annual checkups. He was a person full of vitality and healthy. We were all devastated, but that was not all. In her last days, Sandra said that every night she saw a woman in a black robe in her bedroom who only watched her from a corner of her room. I was terrified. We thought they were hallucinations caused by the medications, but her husband said that she described in detail that figure with a dark look, a pale face, and just a ghoulish smile. Many nights he woke up to Sandra's screams, and some mornings he found her with scratches on her face. Days later, Sandra died. Her husband said that the last few nights were true hell for her. She was getting worse and worse, and he didn't understand why or how to help her. His house was left with a very charged atmosphere. I felt a very dark vibe. I had nightmares and very strange sensations. He said that, in his dreams, he saw Sandra and the woman in the black robe. He had a constant feeling of being watched, and sometimes he heard whispers. He thought he was going crazy. I was worried that the ritual she had interrupted had unleashed something evil that had taken her life and was now after her husband. Desperate, we seek the help of an expert in paranormal phenomena to guide us through all of this. He told us that by interrupting the ritual and touching the objects with our bare hands, we might have attracted and angered an evil spirit. At that time, we decided to perform a spiritual cleansing in his house with the help of an expert. He recommended using salt, burning sage, and saying specific prayers to purify the environment. It was a long and terrifying process, but little by little the atmosphere began to improve, although they warned us that it could be a very difficult process to eliminate, since the presence we had attracted was very strong and could disturb us for life. I can't help but feel guilty for agreeing to return to that damn place that night and allowing Sandra to get rid of that ritual. If I had refused, she would be alive today. I can't understand how something so macabre, so unreal happened. It is difficult to find an explanation for a paranormal event, and until that night, it was difficult for me to believe that these types of stories existed. The memory of that night and what happened to Sandra, years later, still haunts us. We learned a hard lesson about the dangers of stepping into the unknown. Now we live more cautiously, knowing that there are things in this world that we cannot understand or control, and to this day, I pray every day that Sandra rest in peace. If you have enjoyed this story, we invite you to subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any others. Until next time.